I'm just looking at the schedule going forward, and what I like to do over the last 2 weeks is just give you plenty of time in class for working your projects in a setting where I'm available to answer questions and help you with problems that you have with them. So what I would like to do with the remaining topics, if you look on the calendar for today on the schedule, you'll see that I posted a short video on sensors. So the one right there, and it pops up. And I've got a number of kind of short topics that I want to do that for, and make them so that, yeah, I'll mention them at the beginning of the class, but really those are topics that won't necessarily be something that you'll be tested on, but maybe something that will be useful for you and your projects to incorporate. So I'm going to try to make those over the next few days and have those linked to the schedule here so that you can use them as resources and references rather than really spending much time on them during the video call or during the Zoom call. So you should see those start to pop up over the next couple of days. And then in terms of project work time, what I'll do for the next, looks like we got 4 more class periods after today. I'll still start up the Zoom meeting for each of those class periods. We'll have a short presentation or discussions, announcements, whatever, and then really you can just be working on your projects. We can all be muted, whatever, and if you have a problem, you know, do a raise your hand thing or type me a chat, and then we can look at your specific question on your on the project that you're working on, because this is really, that's really the thing that you want to be focusing on from here on out. Does that sound like a good plan? Does everybody think that'll work for you?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
Sounds good to me too.
Sounds good. So you'll notice that on the schedule for today, we have the last part of that mobile native controls assignment due, but also the final project, what I call the alpha version, which is really just maybe a working prototype. And not so much that I need you to turn that in today, but what we're going to talk about today sort of depends on having that ready. Okay, so we'll get back to that in just a minute. But by way of announcement, you should have seen the announcement that I did get one of our classroom computers set up in 1141 JFSB. You should have seen that announcement over here on the dashboard. So that's right there. If you go into 1141, 1141 JFSB is right above where our classroom was. Our classroom is in the basement. 1141 is on the first floor. It's just a big lab with computers and seating and things like that. It's very, very quiet nowadays. And that workstation is set up on the far side of the room next to the windows. And it's just literally one of the computers that was in our classroom. So what you can do on there is log in, set up LiveCode to work with iOS, set it up to work with Android, and then you would be able to test on both the simulator and on an Android device. Now, remember that I've got the link right here, but this is what we talked about way back in January. But that's the link to the instructions on how to set these things up for working with Android Studio and working with different things. The thing about those is that you have, especially Android Studio, you have to set it up per user. So if you recall how we did that in class, you'd want to do that here as well. So I tested it by logging in as myself and ran through the setup, and it seemed to work all right. So hopefully it'll work all right for you as well. If you're only interested in iOS, then you don't have to worry about the Android stuff. And that's, at least from the LiveCode perspective, that's a little more straightforward than setting up for Android. Anyway, so that's available to you. I think I figured out a way to install the certificates and credentials needed to actually connect an iOS device to that computer, and so that you can install your device on you can install your project on your device to test it and so forth. But I've still got to test that. I'll do that later today after the class and let you know. I'll just put another announcement up like this. And I think I can also produce a pretty quick video that shows you how to connect your iOS device to the computer, and how to create a version that can be installed onto that device. So I'll have a little instructional video for that. Okay, questions about that? Okay, good.
Nope, sounds good to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Riley, I know you said are you still working? Are they still letting you work?
Yeah, I'm actually in the JFSB right now because
Oh,
I
okay.
worked this morning and I'll work later.
Yeah, so you may be able to pop down there and see that. It's literally exactly like the classroom computer, so you can test it out and test things on the simulator and things like that. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, I was planning to do it.
Perfect. Okay, let's go back and get to the topic, the main topic of the day. If the schedule will come back, there we go. And that is software evaluation and testing. This is the topic where everybody goes, "Oh, that sounds boring," and in fact, it can be tedious is too strong a word, but it's one of those necessary evils that you have to do, and if you want your software not to be panned by the people that use it. So we're going to talk about some strategies for evaluating software, and some evaluation instruments, ways to maybe make some observations of people that are using your software, and then we're going to actually have you do a little software evaluation for your final project. Okay, so that's really, besides turning in the final project itself, the only other thing you'll have through the end of the semester is just this little testing assignment. So if you see the link there called Evaluating Your Software, if you click on that, you'll see sort of the gist of the discussion for today. Like I said, this is one of those things that you just have to do if you want people to like your software, and if you don't want to have all sorts of unanticipated bugs crop up. Any software company, you know, from the big guys like Microsoft and Adobe, all the way down to, you know, mom and pop shop developers, if you want your software to be bug-free and easy to use, you do user testing. And I wrote myself 3 questions here: why to do it, how to do it, and when to do it. The why I just talked about. The when is really from the beginning stages on through to the final release. You'll see down here at the bottom of this page, I've got a few links. There's actually a section in the Fling textbook that we read from earlier in the semester, mobile usability test tips and tricks. Some really nice, couple of pages of really nice tips on how to test your software, your mobile software. So really, it's something that you should do throughout the whole process. There's a quote that I like that I can't even remember where I heard it, but it goes like this. There are two kinds of bugs in your app, the ones you find and the ones your end users find. You decide who you want to find most of the bugs. Do you want to find them, or do you want your end users to find them? I think the answer is probably obvious. I'm going to skip down to the end again. I've down here where it says how to test your stacks. So I have a good friend, Jackie Gay, who I've known for years and years, probably 25 years, who does LiveCode development. And years ago, she wrote this really nice sort of how-to guide for how to test your stacks. Jackie's a great writer and a good experienced LiveCode developer who's published a lot of LiveCode projects and stacks as applications. But she's got some really down-to-earth, great tips for just making sure that things work the way that you want them to work and not the way you think that they're going to work. So she says, we'll just run through these main points. Before you release your stack, pretend that you just met your application in a crowded library. You don't know anything about it. So try to, obviously as the developer, you know everything about this stack. And you may think that it all works perfectly, but if you try to dismiss everything you think you know about it and go into it with fresh eyes, you may find some things that that you didn't run into during the development process. She says, get some fake data and test your stack with that. This may or may not be applicable to your project, but that goes along with sort of pretending that you're someone else with a different agenda than you have as the developer. But just go run through it and try to test each feature. Click every button, try every bit of functionality to make sure that it's working. Once you've tried everything, number 3, go back and try it all over again in a different order, preferably the wrong order. This is really educational because you can't fool yourself into thinking that all of your users will click all the buttons in the correct order. There's sort of a snarky saying out there that says, if you think that you have created an idiot-proof application, the world will always create a better idiot. That's a mean way of saying that there are always inventive users that think of different ways to approach your program because they have no preconceived notion of how it's supposed to work, and therefore they try doing things in a different way. One of the things that you try to do is actually try to make it fail. So try your hardest to enter incorrect information into every field, enter data in the wrong format, click every button out of logical order. And it's okay if it doesn't produce usable results, but it should definitely not produce any errors either in your scripts. Whenever you repair a script, and this is something that has bitten me many times, and probably every developer, whenever you repair a script, no matter how small the change, start the testing process over again. And the reason for that is that you never know what one change is going to affect. I mean, it may fix the problem, but it also may have rippling effects into other features of your program. So always be diligent in retesting when you make a change. And finally, down on number 4 is where we're kind of starting today. Try to get at least 3 other people to run your application. It's really, really important. You should never release an application that you haven't that no one else besides you has used. It's a recipe for disaster. Early on in my software development and content development career, I released an application, and the first person that reviewed it sent me back a multi-page list of errors that they had found in the content, and I was chagrined and humiliated that so many errors had gotten through. But it was an important lesson because it pointed out to me the importance of really letting other people try to break your program, try to find mistakes, and not depend on your own sharp eye, because I guarantee that you're going to miss things. As you're letting them test, don't tell them what to do. That's a very strict rule. Don't just let them go and let them find their own way through the program. Try running your stack on other people's computers, or in this case, other people's devices as much as you can. You know, the simulator's well and good, but it's always great and really essential to run it on a physical device. I like number 6, and this I have experienced many times. There's one last way guaranteed to find every possible obscure bug, hiccup, and glitch in your application. Demo the stack to someone else. No matter how much testing you've done or how many people have gone over your work, if there's one obscure thing that can go wrong, it will gleefully manifest itself when you're trying to show your work to an important person. This is so prevalent that I call this the demo flag. In other words, I forgot to turn off the demo flag, meaning that you're signaling to the software that you're demonstrating it, therefore you should show all the bugs that may exist, even the ones you don't know about. So that's a good one. Finally, avoid the "it's my baby" syndrome. You have to be ruthless toward your software. You do not want people to love you and love your software. You want the software to work flawlessly. And to do that, you have to be absolutely brutal on yourself and brutal on the software. Okay. So that is, in a nutshell, her sort of guidelines. And I think that's just really sound advice. And what we're going to do is, there we go. What we're going to do is actually create an evaluation instrument and let you work with other people to evaluate your software. So when you're doing evaluations, there's a couple of approaches that you can do. You can either do observation or you can do a questionnaire. In observation, what you're doing is you're giving someone very brief instructions about how to, what the program's about and how to start it. Or maybe not even that, just say, okay, start this program and run it. And I'll just watch you and make some notes about what you do as you're running it. One good technique that I have used when I've done an observation is to ask the user to vocalize or think aloud as they're going through the program. That way you can get an idea of what's going through the user's head. If they're puzzled, if they're thinking certain features are easy or difficult to use, etc. So an observation, typically when you're doing observations, you're not just kind of watching. You've actually created for yourself an observation guide, and you'll use that to take notes, so that for each different person that's evaluating your software or that's trying to use your software, you'll have the same set of things that you're looking for. I'm going to show you some examples of observation guides that I've used over the years. The other way to do it is a questionnaire. So obviously, if you would still have someone using your application, and you might or might not be watching them do it, but at the end of their experience, you would give them a questionnaire, not too long, that would ask them questions about certain things that you're interested in knowing about your software. Okay. Once you've gathered all of that, you want to do an analysis of the results of either your observation or your questionnaires. And in my experience, especially for the first round of testing, an impressionistic analysis is probably more useful than a really kind of, statistical evaluation of all the answers. What you're largely evaluating is the user experience, which is mostly subjective. The other thing that you're watching for and looking for is bugs that you didn't catch during your own testing. And it doesn't matter if only one or even none of the people that are evaluating the software encountered that bug. If you know about a bug, you should fix it so that it doesn't crop up for someone down the road. For numerical responses in your software evaluations, like let's say you have a 1 to 5 scale. How well did this work? 1 being not very well or 5 perfectly. You would want to find the average user response over all the users so that can give you a good idea of how successful that feature was. So if you had a score of 4.8, let's see, 10 users evaluate and the score on that question was 4.8, you would know, well, it was well received, it probably worked pretty well. But if it was 2.5, that means half the people had problems with that feature, and you might want to look at it and revise it before you proceed. Okay. So even if you have numeric responses that you're asking people to give, it's always useful to leave space for the user to give written comments, because you're gonna find things that maybe you didn't anticipate that they will encounter and be able to give you feedback on. So I want to look at some evaluation questionnaires and observation guidelines under this topic, sample evaluation instruments. Okay. So this is just a list of observation and questionnaire forms that I've used over various over the years for various projects that I've been evaluating. Okay, so here's one for a project that I did called Chinese Pronunciation Romanization, and this was an observation form. So we would sit people down and say, all right, here's some software that is intended for beginning Chinese students to learn how to discriminate and how to mark tone in Chinese. So in Chinese is a tonal language, so that tone may change the way that may change the meaning of a syllable. So really, this is just notes for the observer to watch for while observing the subject using the program. So does the student have trouble using the computer and the mouse? Note any times that the user felt confused or hesitated or didn't know what to do next. Observe any crashes or bugs that happen when the program, whether or not the student notices them. And then in this particular evaluation, we asked the tester questions after they completed the session, right? So you can see an example of those. Okay. Here is an example of a questionnaire that I did for another program. And this was one where I would have the user come in and do a certain set of predefined tasks in the program, and then take this questionnaire. You always want to keep it fairly short so that you're not asking them to take a lot of time but here are some examples of some of the questions that we were asking. It's actually kind of an art to make a good questionnaire, because you want to make sure that you're not asking leading questions. So, for example, right, this was a learning application that incorporated videos and audio clips. And we had a little bit of concern that the video clips might not be high enough quality, or that the audio might not be enough quality. So we wanted to avoid asking people something like, was the audio quality good enough? Because that makes them think that, oh, I should be listening for something bad. So they may be finding problems that really aren't problems. So instead, we tried to pose the question in sort of a neutral way. Please comment on the quality of the audio clips or the video clips used in the program. So just making sure that you're not asking questions in a way that the testers think that there is a right or a wrong answer. So here's some examples at the bottom of the page. How difficult or easy were the following to use on a scale from 1 to 5? And again, so these are things that you would total up and find an average at the end. Here's a sample of just a generic questionnaire that may be helpful as kind of a basis for producing something more specific to your program. And then finally, down here, I've got some examples that students have submitted from their projects in past classes. This course used to be called Computers in the Humanities, so CHUM for short. So that's why you'll see that abbreviation sometimes. DigHT, obviously. So here's an example of one group that had a questionnaire that they that they gave their testers to go through, and when they got done, they compiled all of the answers of all of the users into a single form so that they could see all of the responses in one place, which turns out to be surprisingly useful, just to put those the various answers from different people under a single on a single sheet. Notice that they're compiling all the numeric responses here and so forth. You can have a look at some of those in detail. One group one year did both an observation and a user questionnaire. Here's another sample observation form. So there's the observation form, and here is an example of what that person did to compile the test users' comments. Another example for a questionnaire where there's the blank questionnaire and there are the compiled responses from all of the testers. Okay. Now, how to deliver them? You can either do them on paper, as you saw in those examples, or there are a couple of pretty easy ways to set up online surveys or questions. There's Qualtrics, which is a pretty high-end survey and evaluation really website. It allows you to set up a series of questions, and it will compile all of the answers for you and give you a nice report. It's fairly simple to get into, and like I said, it gives you nice compiled results. Google Forms is another way that you can approach it. It's actually a little simpler to figure out, but it will do simple compilations of all of the inputs from your test users. Okay. Any questions to this point?
Nope, not for
Okay.
me.
Okay, thanks. So
My question is, I have a quick one.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Riley.
How do I actually make this available to people to test it? Because it's only going to be on my phone, right?
Right. So that's the tricky part. Let's talk about how this will go down. So here's the assignment down at the bottom of the page. We may have to modify this. In fact, I think because of the need for isolation and semi-quarantine, we may have to cut this down to maybe a minimum of 2 people. Right? Maybe your spouse and some other person with whom you have contact under the current circumstances. So you may get fewer people to give you feedback. So what you should do is either develop a questionnaire or an set of observation guidelines, one or the other. So you can either conduct the evaluation using either direct observation or using a survey instrument questionnaire for whatever you decide. Okay. A minimum, I think I'm going to say, if you can't get 4 people that you can safely interact with under the current circumstances, try to get 2. Compile the results, number 4, for observations. Combine the comments from all testers grouping similar problems and responses together. For questionnaires, again, compile the responses and compile totals and averages if you have numeric responses. Make a list of recommendations for concrete changes that you'll make to your software based on the results of your user evaluations. After considering these recommendations and discussing them with the instructor, you should incorporate the changes you decide are needed into the final version of your project. You may find that some of them are very fundamental and would require major rewriting, and obviously we're just not going to have time to do that, but at least you can communicate that you're aware of those things. And then this is what you should turn in on the due date, which is the last day of class. Copies of the blank survey or observation form, the compiled results of your survey or observation, and the recommendations for changes to your software. Okay. Obviously, you don't want to give me your only copies, so make sure you keep copies for yourself. Now, to Riley's question, what you can do, this is my hope is that I can get this machine in the lab set up for you to actually move this app onto a device so that you can share that with your testers and let them do it on the device. If that's not possible, maybe what you could do is bring them into that lab and show them on the simulator. Let's see, as I recall, Riley, you've got an iPhone, right?
Yeah.
And Chris, I think you had an iPad?
Yeah.
Okay. So my hope is by the end of the day, I'll have a way for each of you to get your app onto a device for testing. Chris, you did turn in, I noticed you turned in an alpha version, and I did verify that it goes onto a device just fine. So this is a little more awkward than in past semesters when we can actually meet in person and try and get these things onto your devices, but I think we can make this work. Please just keep the communications open with me and let me know if you're having trouble. And maybe I can even set up a time when we can come in together and maintaining 6-foot separation, still work on getting that app onto your device for testing. Does that answer your question, Riley?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So stay tuned. I think, like I said, I think I figured out how to make it work in the lab there, and I'll put some instructions together for you later today once I figure that out. What you will need when you come in to do that is obviously the device itself, but you're also going to want the connection cable that has the USB on one end and the connector to the device on the other end. And you'll plug that right into the computer, and then there's a process for creating the standalone mobile application and moving it onto the device. Okay, so that will be the process. So in summary, create a way to evaluate either through observation or through a questionnaire. Identify 2 to 4 people that you can safely interact with to be your test guinea pigs, and then compile the results and submit them to me along with the final project on the last day. For the rest of those topics, as I said, I will create some short videos that describe how to do those, so that in the case where you may need to incorporate some of those features into your app, you'll have some reference for them. Okay. Other questions, comments, anything that you'd like me to look at with you before we adjourn?
I have some questions about my own personal application, but nothing
Okay.
quite great.
Okay.
And I have
So-
nothing so far.
Nothing for you, Riley? Okay. Again, if you are missing any assignments, try to get those in as quickly as you can. And if there's nothing else, we will see you all together back on here on Zoom on Thursday, and it will be a pretty short presentation followed by some project work time where I can just be available for you to ask your questions and try to work through some problems. Okay. All right. Thanks, you guys. And Chris, we can stay on to answer some questions for you.